And Irungo, I'm looking at the statement from the Director General of EPRA, that is Daniel Kipto. In the last line, he says that EPRA wishes to assure the public of its commitment to the observance of fair competition and protection of the interest of both consumers and investors in the energy and petroleum sectors. Okay, well, good assurance, but if you had to look at the reasons behind this, of course, the landed cost of the fuel, talking about the exchange rate that in September last year, they put it at 123. Never mind that the Central Bank of Kenya put it at a different level. Probably they're using the commercial bank rate. But at a time that we're where we are, partly because of the taxation, what would be your comment about the administration looking at the global realities, but also the government needs revenue? Where do they sit in appreciating the reality that Mwananchi is going through? Because really, a litre of kerosene to cost 202 shillings. What is Mwananchi supposed to do with this?
Well, just to be a bit honest, I'm actually slightly confused, and my head is really, how long will I be in this studio before I need to rush to fill my car? Because it's now a material thing, and I'm actually not sure how many people are still listening to us in their homes. I suspect most people who are able to do it have got into their cars and traveled. But let me come back to this. So I think, obviously we're in an international. This is happening in an international context, and there is what now is very common. People talk about the polycrisis. So there is the climate change catastrophe. There is the cost of living challenge. There is other issues to do with democratic recessions and polarization. So all of that Kenya is really experiencing alongside
Russia,
other countries.
Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's Ukraine. Yeah. So there's a global context for this. But I think the first thing we have to say to the government is that you were elected to fix this. Right? And yes, you inherited challenges, but we can't go for the next 5 years with that excuse. We have to see what you will do differently that will make sure that we get through this also without the kind of catastrophes that we're seeing in people's homes. I mean, we've started to see, for example, even the Hustlers Fund, which was really designed around this idea that borrowing from the more formal, the more mainstream was impossible for hustlers. We're starting to see hustlers defaulting against that fund as well. So, we need to think a little bit more about what is the challenge. And I think the challenge for me would really be in the area of efficiencies and wastage. I think one of the opportunities that the government has really failed to take was to have let go of the cabinet administrative secretaries, right? We know they are somehow still nominees, but we also know that they're receiving salaries, they're receiving perks, they're still operating as if they are, they've gone through the vetting process, and there is still a court order against them. So there are areas, I think, where we would want to see the government begin to pull back expenditure and essentially redistribute that. And it's going to be painful, but I don't see why Kenyans need to bear the brunt of that pain. I think government and the state needs to focus. In May, when the first set of taxation proposals came through, I remember writing an article that basically questioned whether these were excessive taxes or whether they were equitable taxes, because there was initially what seemed to be a progressive taxation framework that the government was working on, which is tax heavily the small bracket of middle class and redistribute the benefits to the working class and those who don't have jobs. But I think what we're starting to see now is not just a very punitive set of taxes on the middle class, but we're starting to see with this proposal of taking the VAT from 16 to 18, the beginnings of actually an excessive taxation that will affect everybody. And I think the kerosene charges just are another indicator of this.
Yeah, and you talk about, because now we're into that conversation about where we go from here, because we've done an analysis of the first year of President Ruto, and now there is the second and third and fourth and fifth. We're actually well into, we've now started the second year of that. But
the first day today.
Today is the first day, yes, of the second year of his administration.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, what a way to start his second year. And even with that, the promise of cheaper fuel prices with that deal was rather curious, because, we contracted the oil at a fixed price.
Right.
But what that meant was, with the up and down of the global oil prices, we did not benefit from when it went down. For instance, there was a moment, I think 1 or 2 months ago, when the fuel prices in Tanzania went down due to the changes we see on the global scene. So we bought it at this fixed price. We've had it at that moment, and now here we are. And Sam, even as we now go forward, there was the dispatch from the cabinet about now reconsidering this deal going forward. So to what extent this was heavily defended, and now as we go into the second year, there's rethinking, which might not be a bad thing. I mean, you start something and you realize along the way that perhaps it's not fit for purpose and it doesn't quite achieve the intended aims, and you start to move forward. But then here's another one that we're now hearing about, the medium-term strategy for revenue collection. And if we thought the first year was taxes. Sam, take us through what 2024 to 2027 looks like according to the medium-term plans for this administration.
Allow me first to take you through something, because I think the impact is on what this means.
Yeah.
If you look at the price of diesel going up, the price of petrol going up, assuming you have a matatu that takes 80 liters a day and you fill it with diesel every single day for you to apply the route that you do, at the moment, the driver, because usually it's the drivers that fill those cars, they've been spending 13,558 shillings to get a full tank. You've seen a matatu ikiwa imenamisha mguu moja so that ijae kabisa. So that has been taking 13,558. It is true, Irungu, it happens.
I know. I'm just fascinated by the level of detail.
Yeah, now with the new price, so that was a price of about 160, no, 100, what was the price of diesel? Let me just get it for you now. It was 179 shillings in Nairobi. Now with the new price of 200 shillings, 99 cents, it goes up to 16,079 shillings. So that's an increment of 2,500 shillings to get a full tank of that matatu that is on diesel. So they are supposed to ferry people that are commuting to wherever they are going. So what do you think is going to happen? The driver, the investor, is in no way going to go at a loss because the petroleum products have become more expensive. So this is obviously going to be transferred to the mwananchi who is using that matatu. If it is transportation of goods, for instance, cooking oil, you have to be ready because diesel or petrol. You okay?
I was going to say maybe not in Ruru, but carry on.
Okay. Petrol and diesel have to be used to transport those goods. Yeah. So obviously this is going to impact on the inflation, especially for fuel-related inflation. Remember, the government statistics are showing that the inflation has relaxed a little bit. In August, it was 6.73%. Yeah. Of course, there are certain things that are missing from that. The food inflation has been explained to have fallen. Again, there are certain products that are missing from that, including sugar. But then the question of fuel inflation has been on the rise. Expect it that because of this, it is going to get even higher. Now, if you have to talk about, or you're saying, the proposal, I hear Irungu mentioning about it, that there's a suggestion to raise VAT from 16% to 18% because it is important for the region to be uniform, to harmonize the VAT rates within the region. And I wonder, what is the agenda here? I remember the president saying, I run the government of Kenya, not IMF. So when the president, when the National Treasury is saying that we want to harmonize, who runs this country? Is it the East African region, the East African heads of state, the summit itself, or is it the government of Kenya really? When you hear that there's consideration on the reliefs that Kenyans benefit from, is it the personal relief? Is it the insurance relief that they want to look into them to ensure that there is equity, there is harmonization, there is to avoid people evading tax? And look, at the moment, there is a tax relief every Kenyan benefits from, which is 2,400 shillings. If you look at the tax bands, the first 24,000 is supposed to be taxed at 10%. So 10% of 24,000 is 2,400, meaning any person who is earning 24,000 shillings end up paying no tax. Yes. So the government is saying that they have noticed there are people who are using this relief to evade tax. Probably it's true, because if you have employees and you want to avoid taxation, you can pay them 24,000 shillings or 23,000 shillings. But what is the essence here? Because personal relief is as old as taxation. Yeah. Probably those that have worked for longer than I have, you may confirm that. So when you take it away, what are you trying to do? If you're starting the conversation of taxation of, is it services in education institutions that are not necessarily educational, what does that even mean? So that you're telling me, if a child is going to an institution and they're being taken for swimming, so that service will be taxed at a time that you're trying to develop as many skills as possible.
Yeah.
So where shall we get the swimmers in this country?
You know, Samuel, we're talking about that, and for me, the categorization, at least for that one, is interesting, because we're talking about, say, introducing some sort of tax for those who are going into swimming, which they call extracurricular activities. However, CBC does not qualify sports, the arts as extracurricular, but rather a main part of the curriculum, which is why CBC offers various pathways, so that not everyone who's gifted in science or mathematics, that's why they've created different pathways, including the arts, including sports, that at some point, you know, math and science is not for you, you can get into sports. Math and science is not for you, you can get into the arts. Even into apprenticeships like mechanics and plumbing and, you know, electronics, that sort of thing. So that is the basis of CBC, that is saying we recognize the children are gifted in various ways, including sports. But now we say sports is extracurricular. Not only that, we say, oh, well, if you're doing sports, then, you know, you're perhaps more privileged than the others, and therefore a tax would be applicable there. Something about that doesn't ring true. I mean, you know, it's what we're saying. You say one thing on this end, and then, you know, the actions or the proposals are somewhat different. I find that extremely curious.
I mean, here's the thing, you know, economists can justify anything.
Yeah.
What we have to, as a people, be clear about is what is the impact of the policies that are being developed. And rather than looking to the intentions that are, I guess, that are communicated as being behind the policies, what we have to look at is actually what's the impact of this. So for educationalists, the point you're raising is this taxation, this tax, is it actually working against education policy? Right? Is it working against human resource and people power strategies for this country? The other thing that we can expect is that they will be, you know, increasingly what we used to call the kadogoization of the economy. So instead of buying large amounts of things, we are now going to buy little small bits of margarine, oil, and less potatoes, and maybe a little bit more meat, or even perhaps meat will become a thing that we do on Christmas, like we used to talk about chapati. As a vegetarian, I've already taken that route. I know where the government is going. So we're going to continue.
Coming for the wheat.
And then the last thing I think is that we have to prepare for greater grievances and protests. You know, and sadly, they will not be pretty. I mean, it will be, you know, the experience of that young 28-year-old boy, Robert Kituhu, who committed suicide in Mombasa because he just could not see a future for himself and his family. It's not going to be pretty. It is also going to be, you know, disruptive. We're going to see more people on the streets. We've already seen this in the context of the last year or so. Somehow, I think there was a feeling that it was Azimio that was pulling people on the streets. No. At some point, actually, Azimio was trying to catch up behind all the people that were ready to go to the streets. And I think this is going to be the case. And I think just to use a biblical phrase, you know, in Luke 23, I think it's 23:2, the story of Jesus Christ is made very clear. You know, Jesus Christ essentially was tortured and extrajudicially killed because he led a tax rebellion. So my question is, are we not going to see a different kind of leadership emerge? And I think for Christians, perhaps the idea of Jesus Christ returning to protect us from all these terrible taxes may be attractive. But I think the point is that we're going to see a lot of grievance and disturbance as a result of these taxes.
Yeah, I want us to just hold that thought, because I need us to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this. Maybe Jesus Christ will come, or maybe there will be a journey to heaven. Whichever comes first, we shall see. Let's take a break here on the show on a night when we have seen some of the highest jumps in the prices of fuel. 33 shillings increase for the price of kerosene, crossing the 200 shilling mark. We'll be right back. We'll talk about that and more with Ruto's second year in office, and third and fourth and fifth. This is Newsgang. We'll be back.